Right now, many people think that the New England Patriots got one of the potential steals of the 2025 draft in wide receiver Kyle Williams. He has been surging this summer, and from the looks of things, it looks like he was a hidden gem. But Kyle Williams was never supposed to be here. He was an extreme late riser in his high school class, was a zero-star recruit, and started out at UNLV. His chances of being a big-time NFL receiver were pretty much at zero, but after a position change, he ended up becoming a star for UNLV, and then became a superstar at Washington State. Nobody really talked about him the last couple of years, but Williams now has an opportunity to prove it to the world and become a big-time piece for the New England Patriots. In today's video, we're going to continue my Rookie Spotlight series, as we're going to take a look at the rise and journey of Kyle Williams. We're going to go through how all this happened, his crazy college career, and what the initial thoughts are with him in New England. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about Kyle Williams. So in order to understand how he got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Kyle Williams was born in Baltimore, Maryland, but moved to Inglewood, California at a young age. Growing up, he loved watching Michael Vick, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson, as those guys could carve up defenses with both their arms and legs, and he dreamt of playing in the NFL as a quarterback. What's great is he also had plenty of talent tucking it away and running, much like his childhood heroes. But, as I said, yeah, he was a quarterback, but he was a backup. He was at Narbonne High School for 2 seasons before eventually transferring to Hawthorne for his junior year. In his lone season at Hawthorne, he ended up passing for 2,114 yards and 26 touchdowns. He also ran for nearly 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, and on paper, he was a pretty good player. He emerged as a star dual-threat quarterback, but at the time, then St. Monica head coach Anton Clarkson believed he had potential to be a better wide receiver. Throughout the summer, Coach Clarkson gloated to their AD about their new weapon who he had convinced to transfer schools. Clarkson believed that Williams would become an NFL receiver one day. That's a pretty far-fetched statement to make. So yeah, he ended up working with the infamous Clarkson quarterback clan, and Williams entered his camp hoping to follow in those footsteps, but as I said, he exited with a very vastly different outlook on his career. After reviewing his film and watching him throw, Clarkson realized Williams was playing the wrong position. He felt Kyle was too raw as a passer and didn't have enough time to develop into a polished quarterback before college. So Clarkson advised him to play receiver the next season. He said, quote, "I kind of looked at him and said, look, if you had a couple of years at this thing, I think you could be a pretty special quarterback, but he was playing catch up. It was pretty easy to see that if he had played receiver, he'd be a special player." Yeah, for a guy who played quarterback and wanted to do that his whole life, it was probably a little bit shocking and probably a little bit annoying. He said, quote, "For me it was shocking. This is what I grew up my whole life wanting to be, and I watched YouTube videos and all this. I got the ball in my hand every play, and now I have to switch out and have somebody else throw me the ball. I was like, nah." But we had a couple more talks, and at that point, I was just like, you know what, I just want to play at this point, so I trusted him, and look where I'm at now. Yeah, Kyle ended up in a good spot. He had to get used to not being in charge of the ball every play, as he loved having it at the start, and he loved being the center of attention. But as I said, Williams trusted Clark's judgment and made the switch. After his father found a job in the area, him and his brother ended up joining Clarkson's squad at St. Monica High School, and he wreaked havoc. He ended up having 31 catches for 763 yards and 9 touchdowns. One coach said, quote, "He was the kind of guy that could hitch and go 80 yards. Let's just say he was a little better than the rest of the league." From there, his performances caught the attention of Division I schools as the season went on, as at the time, apparently Tennessee's receivers coach T. Martin was looking to offer Williams a scholarship, but the Baltimore Ravens poached him before that could happen. He ultimately connected with then head coach Marcus Arroyo at UNLV, and he would pick them over the likes of San Diego State and Colorado State. Clarkson said, quote, "I think when it came down to it, Coach Arroyo loved the kid and believed in him. UNLV was the best situation for him at the time, and it gave him an opportunity to get on the field early, which was high on the priority list." Williams said having been a quarterback allowed him to understand coverages better, and he knew where the soft spots on the field were. Ultimately, on some sites he was a 0-star recruit, and other sites he was a 3-star, but 24/7 Sports did not have him in the database. Either way though, he was headed off to UNLV. So Kyle would arrive at UNLV back in 2020, and who was supposed to catch passes was not something that was on the radar for them. They had plenty of other question marks. Marcus Arroyo said, quote, "When we recruited him and watched his film, there were a lot of things trait-wise that stood out that we believe would translate fast into our offense. He had top-end speed, vertical, and overall explosion that could make him a playmaker with the ball. As a freshman, he ended up getting an opportunity to get on the field, as Kyle Williams showed out and became one of the best young players in the Mountain West. He ended up having 5 catches against Fresno State in their third game, and then went over 100 yards with 9 catches and a touchdown against San Jose State. To finish off the season, he caught 10 passes for 144 yards and a touchdown against Hawaii, and he was the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. In total, he had 35 receptions for 426 yards and 2 touchdowns. Expectations got higher, and he somewhat delivered. He ended up having 6 catches for 87 yards in their opener, but failed to have a huge impact until later on in the season against San Jose State, as he caught 7 passes for over 100 yards against the Spartans. To close out the year, he had a touchdown against Nevada, and then 137 yards and a touchdown against New Mexico. In total, he finished with 42 catches for 601 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was good, but didn't necessarily take that next step. Headed into 2022, he would take that next step. He caught a touchdown pass in their first 4 games against Idaho State, Cal, North Texas, and Utah State, went for over 100 yards against Hawaii, and then had 76 yards and a touchdown against Nevada. In total, he ended up having 40 catches for 541 yards and 5 touchdowns. In his 3 years at UNLV, he had over 1,500 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns in 117 games, and he played in 25 matchups. He'd decide to enter the 2023 transfer portal, where you get offers from schools like Pitt, Cal, Fresno State, Colorado State, and Washington State. Ultimately, he would decide to go up to Pullman, Washington, and chose to be a Cougar. I wouldn't say anybody was super talkative about this guy, but he ended up having a great season. He caught a touchdown pass in their first 4 games once again, which included 2 ranked wins over number 19 Wisconsin and number 14 Oregon State. In that Oregon State matchup, he had 174 yards as well. He did sort of have a slump in the middle of the season besides an excellent game against Oregon, but to finish off, he had a touchdown pass and a win over Colorado, and then in a 3-point loss to number 4 Washington, he also had a touchdown. Kyle Williams was a breakout star in the Pac-12, finishing with 61 receptions for 842 yards and 6 touchdowns, but there was now going to be trouble on the horizon. At the time, On3 had cited a source that he'd be entering the transfer portal. Was this due to him trying to get more money, going to a better school, or the fact that Washington State was no longer a Power 4 team? I don't know. But eventually it was cleared up, and he quote tweeted that account saying that he was staying in Pullman for 1 more season. Their NIL collective ended up saying, quote, "We jumped into the fray to save the day, and we made it harder for Williams to potentially leave." That makes me think that he definitely was getting offers from other schools and that there was some truth to the rumor, but ultimately he would be back in 2024, and alongside newfound star quarterback John Mateer, he would become a star. In their first game against Portland State, he caught 4 passes for 141 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also followed it up with a touchdown in their next game against Texas Tech. They were off to a great start, and after beating both Washington and San Jose State, Washington State was an early Cinderella last year. Sadly, despite 9 catches against Boise State, they were not able to pull off an upset against the Broncos, but they would continue to play well. They rallied off 4 straight victories against Fresno, Hawaii, San Diego State, and Utah State, and in that Utah State game, Kyle Williams had 3 touchdowns. Wazoo is now in the mix for a college football playoff spot, and while it was far-fetched, it was possible. Unfortunately, they would blow it in the last month, as they lost their last 3 games in New Mexico, Oregon State, and Wyoming, but Kyle had some really good performances. He had 9 catches for 181 yards and 3 touchdowns against New Mexico, 95 yards and a touchdown against Oregon State, and then a touchdown against Wyoming. He would play one last college football game against Syracuse in the Holiday Bowl, and despite losing 52-35, Kyle went out with a bang. He had the best game of his career, finishing with 10 catches for 172 yards and 1 touchdown. In total, Kyle ended up having 70 receptions for 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns, and was one of the top receivers in all of college football. He ended up being 4th in the FBS with those touchdowns, and he was just 1 behind both Travis Hunter and Jeremiah Smith. That put him in elite territory. He ended up having the single-season record for receiving touchdowns and 4th in receiving yards, and he also broke the Holiday Bowl record for receiving yards. He ended up declaring for the 2025 NFL Draft and was seen as an early Day 3 selection. After clocking a 4.4 40-yard dash time, he ended up moving his way into Day 2. That's exactly what would end up happening, as Williams was eventually taken with pick number 69 in the 3rd round by the New England Patriots. This pick was immediately given a ton of praise, as many people thought they got a steal in the 3rd round. Personally, I didn't know much about Kyle Williams, but after looking into his stats and watching some of his highlights, he looks like he's going to be a lot of fun. The Patriots already added Stephon Diggs and Mac Hollins, and he gives the Pats a deep threat target and a receiving room that's hoping to finally take the next step. Former NFL quarterback and NBC analyst Chris Sims was one of the top supporters of Williams during the pre-draft process. He actually listed Kyle Williams as the number 2 overall receiver in the draft class behind Travis Hunter and ahead of Tetairoa McMillan. Okay, that was a little bit crazy, but maybe Kyle will eventually prove everybody wrong and prove that he is one of the top pass catchers. But, as everyone's probably going to point out, the Patriots have really struggled with developing receivers, as a lot of the guys end up becoming busts, and last year's selections of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker didn't really look all that great either. In fact, Baker was absolutely horrible last year. But Kyle Williams is hopefully built and made different than those guys, and maybe he can become a good number 3 or number 2 option for Drake May immediately. They also have Demario Douglas on the roster, and things are going to be interesting, but I would not doubt Kyle Williams. But what do you guys think? If you're a Washington State or a Patriots fan, what do you think of Kyle Williams? How do you think he'll do in his rookie year? And what other players should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen, including my video about Torrey Horton. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.